Hi everyone. I hope I'm live. It looks like I am. Hi everyone in the Trust Fundraising Hub. I'm really pleased to be able to speak to you all today about prospect research and everything about prospect research. I'm going to tell you a little bit about who I am. I'm going to focus this session on developing and prospecting strategy or plan. And I've also factored in some time for some questions that have been posted on Facebook already, or any that you might have during our live session now. So I'm just going to jump straight in and introduce myself. Excuse me, I've got a bit of a cough today. But my name is Susie Stevens. I am a prospect researcher. I've been doing it now since I left university way back in 2007, so quite a while. And I kind of fell into it. I worked for a small kind of boutique agency based in Cheltenham, and my first job in prospect research was actually taking information from the Sunday Times Wealth Register that long ago, and Companies House and updating their database on wealthy and influential people, your kind of high net worth philanthropists, and other business people that might have capacity to give major donations, as well as kind of charitable trusts and foundations and companies. And from there, I worked there for about 3 years, and then I moved over to Save the Children UK, based in London. I was there for the best part of 10 years and left very recently. Actually, I've just finished maternity leave for my youngest daughter, and I was there managing their team of prospect researchers. There were 4 of us in total, and as I say, was there for the best part of 10 years, working really closely with kind of philanthropy and partnerships colleagues. So, you know, trust fundraisers, major donor fundraisers, corporate, and kind of work with them on everything from research profiles to identifying new prospects to helping them manage their prospects through a pipeline. I noticed someone mentioned that on Facebook. As well as doing kind of due diligence, just general kind of ways of working together. And then for the past 3 years, I've been simultaneously freelancing. I set up the prospect development company back in 2016, really as a way for me to manage my time, my work-life balance a little bit better, and make sure that I can see my young children as much as possible and not miss bedtime by having to travel up to London. And now I'm in kind of the prospect development company full-time-ish around my kids. So that's kind of me and my background. So I'm going to kick off and talk about having a prospecting strategy in place to kind of really, I guess, provide a focus and a guide for trust fundraising. And the purpose of it is not to be kind of super formal or pages and pages long. It could be the size of an A4, one side of A4. It could be part of a wider fundraising strategy or a set of KPIs. And it shouldn't be kind of set in stone. It should be organic and flex to the needs of the organisation when needed. Obviously, you don't want to be flip-flopping around. I've been in organisations where there's a strategy that comes out, a 3-year strategy, and then the next year another 3-year strategy comes out, and it's slightly different but slightly the same. So you want something to really guide you, and to think about where you are now, where you want to get to, and how you're going to get there. But obviously needs do change, so making sure that that's reflected as well. I think really it should be this guide, prospecting plan. It should be there to kind of help fundraisers to meet organisational objectives and to really demonstrate how trust fundraising fits alongside other fundraising functions. You don't want it to get lost in, especially in very big organisations. You want to understand where you fit in, and that's really important, and what you're bringing to the table, the contribution that you and your team, or just you if you're a sole fundraiser, is making. So I'd really encourage, and at the end of this I'm going to share access to a kind of prospecting plan template that I've produced, that you're welcome to use, outlining some of the things that I'm talking about now. I think it's really important when you're setting up a strategy of any type, really, but particularly fundraising strategy, and prospecting, is to add that context to really bring it to life. So you might, for as a trust fundraising audience, you might give an overview of the trust fundraising landscape, and there's lots of reports produced on an annual basis that will provide these statistics for you, and also give a bit of history about your trust fundraising operation at your organisation. The charity sector, it goes through kind of peaks and troughs of recruitment, and having worked at the same organisation for quite a long time, I saw people come and go, and new people will come in and say, oh, we should try doing this, and they've got ideas, and having been there for quite a while, it's really good to have the documentation to say this is where we've come from, particularly if you're a well money charity. So I think providing a history of trust fundraising at your organisation can again kind of just set out where you've come from and where you want to get to, and why you're doing it in this way. So then we need to think about the need. So not just, I guess everything ultimately is driven by need. That's why charities exist, but not just the kind of the immediate needs, but also the long-term needs. So we all know that trust fundraising and major gift fundraising more broadly, it's not an overnight thing. It takes, in some cases, years to be able to go from identifying a prospect to getting the gift. That can take quite a long time, and not everybody understands that, particularly people that haven't worked in trust fundraising or in major gift fundraising. If it's somebody at the CEO level, they might not understand that the number of prospects that you need to identify, and how many asks you need to make, and then to finally get that gift, how long that cycle actually takes, and it's quite a lot of work and dedication to get to something in the end. So you might be thinking about this year or next year, but also you need to be thinking about 3 years time, because the need then is the kind of the prospects that you're going to be identifying now. So it's about understanding the need, and that might be the types of funding that you need. So are you trying to move towards more kind of core funding, unrestricted, which is the way a lot of charities, restricted is like the unicorn of major gift fundraising. So are you trying to dial down the targeted asks and dial up the unrestricted asks? Have you got a capital campaign, or just are you in need of equipment or salaries? Think about the types of funding that you need, because ultimately that is going to determine the types of prospects that you're going to try and identify. Also think about your KPIs and your targets, and that might be you individually, it might be your team, it might be your organisation. How much income do you need to raise? And that might be this year, it might be over a 3-year period. And from that, how many prospects might you need, and at what financial ask level? And you might record this in a gift table or a gift pyramid, although it's never kind of a pyramid, it's more like that Christmas tree maybe. So think about that and have that in your strategy. You need to capture, this is the why, why are you having this, why have a strategy, and the template that I mentioned, I've included in there a kind of really rough gift table, which is very much at the kind of higher level, and you can just change it as and when you need to. If you're a smaller organisation and you're not, you might not have £1 million asks, you might be aspirational. Why not? It shouldn't, your size shouldn't affect the ask level that you're going for. And then also in your strategy, I'd really take the time to understand your current donors. So take stock of who your trust donors are, and really analyze and get behind the data as to where your income comes from, look at what's successful, and also take the time to review what's unsuccessful. And is it that you're unsuccessful because is it that you're, sorry, I'm reading the comments as they come in. Is it that they're unsuccessful because you asked too high or too low, or the program wasn't right? I know that, trusts, whilst they are there and set up to give away money, they are oversubscribed, as it were. And so many don't have the capacity to give you feedback. But that doesn't mean you can't look at the data that you have. If you're tracking your asks in a pipeline, which I'm a huge advocate for as a researcher, what are the themes that you can unpick from your data, and use that? You could look at the average and the max gift size made by your current funders. Could you be asking for something different? Could you be asking for more? Are you being ambitious enough? A really good place to start as well about your donors is looking at your lapsed donors. So is it that they've changed their funding priorities? There are some funders out there who like to change their kind of themes of their grants annually or biannually, and then there's others that fund the same year on year on year. So look at those lapsed donors again. Have they changed their funding priorities? And also, I guess, could they be warm to you again? This is a really good place to start for organisations that have been around for a while, just checking in and taking stock. And this is really going to help you to identify the gaps. So looking at the number and the value of your asks that you've got scheduled against your kind of typical conversion rate. And as a researcher, I tend to work towards a gift conversion of, for every one gift, you need to ask 3 prospects. And for those 3 asks, you need to have identified 9 or 10 prospects. So the kind of 10 or 9 to 3 to 1. So have you got enough asks out there against your conversion rate? Do you have enough prospects to meet your financial goals? Which I guess moves us into looking for new prospects. I've noticed, Olivia, your comment on researching prospects for core funding, as it is difficult to secure. It definitely is. And I think, from my understanding, the reason of that is that donors like to see where their money's going from and feel that they've made a difference in a certain project and it's tangible. And I guess that's just the way that fundraising is. But there are funders out there that will fund, I guess, core funding. And I guess is part of it down to how you package up your proposition, really, for core funding, being able to demonstrate that, I guess, that the donor can trust you and your organisation enough to make the best judgment on where that money can be spent. And I know kind of trust in charities at recent times has been I guess a real low. So how can you build that trust and then they can trust that you're going to make the best decision in terms of spending their money, and how, I guess, again, how do you report back on how that money's been spent, if that's what they require. There's a charity consultant who has done a really great job of pulling together some lists of donors. So in the charity excellence framework, I think that's what it's called. So have a look there. There might be a list of kind of core funders in there. I'm going to come back to the comments in just a minute. So thinking back to our fundraising strategy, a good place to start might be doing a bit of competitor or peer analysis, and seeing actually who's funding them. And this is actually a really simple exercise to undertake. Most charities either do or did publish in their kind of thanks to supporters in their annual report the people that have made major gifts to them. So why don't you look at other organisations who have a very similar mission to you, or if you're a local charity that are also based in the same area as you, and see who's funding them. And again, it's just a way of I guess stopping and taking stock of where you are and making sure you're not missing out on some funding. And as I say, that's quite a simple exercise to do, and it's free. Also looking for new prospects. The Charity Commission searching is another thank you, yes, Ian McClintock, that's right, thank you, on the comments. And so sorry, yeah, the Charity Commission advanced searching is also a really good place to start. Again, it's free. You know, it's not the most sophisticated search function going, I think we can all agree, but you can filter it down. You know, if you focus on those charities that have are based in your area, or fund your area, or fund your theme, and give to organisations, there's a little drop down of who it gives to money to, and I tend to kind of drop it down to only show those that make donations to other organisations rather than individuals, because that's kind of what we need. And just kind of going through and looking for new prospects. There's there might be merit in looking at newly established trusts and foundations. Again, you can search the Charity Commission in the advanced search function by the date it was registered. So, you know, regularly, and when I worked at Save the Children, we used to do this on a monthly basis. So every month we'd kind of look at those that were registered the previous month to see if there were any that kind of, from the very limited information that you get when a charity first registers with the Charity Commission, is there any that look like they could be potential funders? And we kind of make a note of them, and we tried a few different variations of going out to them straight away. On many occasions they were literally just in the planning phase, and they just weren't ready yet. So then we made a decision to just kind of put them in a bit of a holding file, and then revisit them kind of 12 to 18 months later when they had some accounts published and we could try and understand them a bit better before we reached out to them. There are resources out there that are paid for subscription. So the DSC's Funds Online, that was trust funding, there's Grant Finder, there's Factory Fi. You know, these are really what, I guess there's pros and cons to these. They're generally good for searching for things that might fit a project or a criteria. But ultimately they're getting their information from the Charity Commission. So I guess you're paying for convenience. My experience, I've had experience of using trust funding. I'm not sure if it's improved in recent times, but I found that the kind of search criteria was okay. The data tended to be slightly out of date, so you'd end up then having to go back and check the Charity Commission anyway. I haven't really got that much experience. Factory Fi is really good, I would say, if you want to, if you're starting from scratch, because you can it's a relatively cost-effective way of looking at that competitor. Like, so you could, you know, look at who has been acknowledged in as funders to certain peers or competitors, and have a look at them. And I think that's quite a good place to start if you're just starting out. I would also say that perhaps it's maybe only worth it if you've got the capacity to take on new prospects. You know, everybody is stretched for time. I get that. Everyone's got a to-do list that they can never finish. So in theory, yes, do prospect research and look to diversify your portfolio, but make sure that you've got the capacity to take these prospects on. I've kind of mentioned newly registered charities. I guess when you're looking for new prospects, think about the size of the gifts and the projects that you need funding. I guess chances are there's only going to be a handful of new prospects each year where you truly fit their funding criteria and who can give a major gift. You might have some trusts that you can add to a kind of low level mailing program or, you know, secondary portfolio. But those that are giving it the major gift, they don't come along very often. So they might be sat in your lapsed donor pool. They might already be a donor. I know that's probably not the answer that you guys want to hear. I may be wrong, but that's my kind of experience of it. But as I said before, if you're a relatively new organisation, this is such a great place to start in terms of looking for new prospects that are out there. And I'm going to move on to tracking prospects to monitor success. So as I mentioned, I am a huge advocate for prospect management or pipeline systems. If anyone's worked with me or met me in person, they will know this. Speak to anybody at Save the Children in their P&P team. I think the first word that will come to mind is probably pipeline, because I've been banging that drum for a very long time. I think the reason that I love the pipeline, as well as being a kind of real data head, is that it not only helps you to track success and conversion rate, but it also helps to build a picture of the supporters' engagement with your charity. And, you know, I've seen on a few occasions where pipelines and data records aren't kept up to date, and a new fundraiser's come in to the organisation. They've approached quite a disengaged donor, and it's gone a bit wrong because the previous account manager hasn't updated the donor records. So I would, it is so vital to make sure that you can see who you're asking and what for and when, and, you know, that you've got so much rich data then to then analyse and understand your fundraising operations and your fundraising model more effectively. I think it's also really key in mapping your targets for immediate and future years. So, you know, I would really encourage people way before the start of the year, you know, if you're, say, towards the end of this year, ready for next year, I would stop and look at the pipeline and say, right, what asks have we got that are going to come in next year, i.e. 2021? And then look at the gaps, because are you going to fill those gaps by starting to ask now, or actually are you not going to fill them because trust funding, like many other major gift fundraising operations, takes longer than 12 months. So I think the pipeline, it really helps you to understand your portfolio more broadly, and whether or not you can make any targets that you've got. I think what's really important about you know, having a strategy and or prospecting plan in place is great. I really like having things written down so I can go back and check them, and, you know, they're there in writing just in case. But I think it's really important that you just don't write it and then put it in a file somewhere on your server or on your personal drive. It's really important to take the time and actually review and reflect on where you are against your strategy or plan on a regular basis. It might be the last quarter, the last 6 months, or the last year. I think you need to reflect on how it's gone and review what's planned for your next kind of time frame, and whether or not you need to adapt anything or change it. I think this is really key, and this is something, you know, the prospect research team at Save the Children, we were really fortunate. There were 4 of us, which is quite big, particularly for some of you guys out there. It might just be you as part of your job, and having a 4-man team of prospect researchers might sound like heaven, might not, but hopefully it does. But we would sit down with each of the P&P teams at the start of the year. We'd understand what their priorities were, and then we would then kind of work back and think, right, how are we going to help them meet those? And every kind of quarter, 6 months, a year, we'd meet again and say, right, this is what we said we would do, this is what we did, this is what we delivered, you know, have you got any feedback on that? And then this is what you said you had planned for the kind of second half of the year. Is this still accurate? Do we need to change our approach? Is there things that you thought you might need that actually you don't anymore? So it's really key to kind of just stop and reflect. And I know taking time and creating space in your working kind of day is quite challenging in the charity sector. But I think it's really, you will feel so much better if you just stop and reflect and spend that time, rather than just keep going and going and going and going and going, and then stopping and thinking, okay, well, I've kind of got over here, but I'm not really sure what I've done. You know, sometimes we all get to the end of the day and think, I'm not really sure what I've done. Like, I've been busy all day, but I haven't, I'm not sure what I've achieved. I think it's really good, and a bit of kind of self-reflection and self-recognition of the hard work that you've done if you can create that space and time to reflect. Now, someone's mentioned here, how do you get the money in the first place to hire a fundraiser? And there are charities out there who do fund salaries and core costs. And I guess it's about demonstrating in your proposal the return on investment. So, you know, thinking of myself as a prospect researcher, I appreciate that funds are tight, and there's a balance between spending money on programs versus spending money on fundraising to, you know, raise money for the next pound, or however you want to phase it. And I get that, and I understand that investing in a prospect researcher, whether that's somebody in-house or a freelancer, it costs money, but actually the return on investment could be really high. You know, if you were to spend, say, a couple of £1,000 with a freelancer and getting a list of charitable trusts and foundations that can give at a higher level, and you're successful, like, I'm not sure, you know, my maths aren't great, but I'm sure the return is pretty high compared to your initial spend, particularly if they go on and they give year on year. So really good question. I do think that there are trusts out there that will fund fundraisers salaries, at least in part, and I guess it's about how you create that as a proposition. So I guess thinking about, do you do it yourself? Do you enlist the support of a kind of professional researcher? It depends. I guess it depends where you have on your budget. You might not have any option but to do it yourself, or as part of your role as a trust fundraiser. I would say those that are lucky enough to have an in-house researcher, just use them. They are likely, and no disrespect to anybody, but they're likely to be able to do it more efficiently because that is their skill set. Especially if they've been doing it for a number of years, they know where to get the information from really quickly, and how to kind of put it together in quite a succinct way. That's one of our kind of skills as a researcher. And also it just frees up your time to specialise in what, to do what you specialise in, which is fundraising and writing applications and getting out there. Researchers tend to retain a lot of information, a lot more than they put down on paper. I have some weird and wonderful facts about philanthropists and certain people, and that's all in here. And normally it's like the more obscure the better. But because they retain so much information, and they're usually working with other teams across the organisation, and including other major giving teams, so major donors and corporates, they might remember details about trustees or key supporters, and that's so valuable because an experienced researcher will kind of question, or might even already recognise who a trustees are, and might be able to help you to identify those kind of networks and introduction opportunities. I guess for those who haven't got that dedicated in-house researcher but may have budget to enlist a freelancer, there are some really experienced researchers out there. And as I say, have that kind of skill set to identify some great prospects for you. And the cost of their services, as I say, will probably be covered in a single major gift, I like to think. So that's kind of it in terms of the prospecting strategy. As I mentioned, I've got a kind of template that I'm happy to share with you. So there were a couple of questions that came up on Facebook before the event, which I'm just going to cover. So someone mentioned kind of about research resources, paid versus free, online versus offline, and I just say a combination of both is a really great place to be, but it obviously depends on your budget. So as I mentioned in my experience about trust funding, most of the resources that you pay for tend to be great for kind of searching against criteria and finding information quickly, but then that information appears to be just taken from the sources that you can access for free anyway. So the Charity Commission or the Scottish Register, or even the Trust's own website. So I've definitely seen in my years of doing it, more and more trusts have their own website, and that might be just a landing page, or it might be quite detailed depending on how big the trust is. There might also be some useful resources at your library, and that particularly if you're in London, but also maybe at your local library. For example, my West Sussex library card allows me to access who's who and who was who online for free. I just enter my library card number and then boom, got access to it. So I would check your local area and see what resources they have. A lot of the big libraries might have some of the published directories of kind of grant makers available. You might be able to order them in. I'm not quite sure, but that might be a good place to start. I think also if you want to kind of, I guess this is less prospect research, but if you want to get in front of some fundraisers and you happen to be in London, there's some larger charities that are quite involved in the kind of philanthropy community, and I've been to a couple of kind of evening events that are about philanthropy, but there are philanthropists there, so why not, if you can go along, might be a good L&D opportunity for you, but also you might happen to be able to have a conversation with one of the funders while you're there. Someone also asked a question about researching and using trustee networks, and I wasn't sure whether you meant your own trustees or the trustees of your trust prospects. So I've kind of thought about both, and I think for any fundraising operation, it's really vital that you understand who your own trustees are and who they might be connected to. And you can do this either through desk research, so seeing what boards they sit on together, or actually by talking to them. And I know, I have done this myself with kind of senior leaders. And you say, oh, who do you know? And they say, oh, I don't really know anybody. But then you say, do you know this person? They say, oh, yeah, I do know that person. So going with a list always helps. And you can use things like Companies House, maybe even LinkedIn, to see who they might be connected to. We've also done it in the past where we would pull together a list of our top trust prospects, and who their trustees are, and then just circulate it with your board to see if they know anybody. And that might seem quite simple, but hopefully quite effective. I'm just going to have a quick whiz through some of these comments now, and hopefully I'll have answered as many as I can. So showing an example of the kind of gift pyramid or tree. I guess they look a bit like a funnel or an inverted funnel, but if you wanted kind of a visual representation, in my template I've got a gift table, which is not quite as snazzy, but does the same job essentially, and really that just looks at the type of gift bands that you need, how many prospects you need. Oh, I'm doing this backwards because it's kind of reversed. How many prospects you need, how many asks you're going to make, how many to get how many gifts, how many of those gifts at that level you need, and then cumulatively how many, and what does that equal. So it's in the template which I'll share. I'll speak to Lucia and make sure that I can share it in some way. If you had a high rate of success, sorry, just reading the comments, if you applied to 9 and received 8, would you have to turn it down? I mean, if you manage to get 8 out of 9 applications, I think you are a fundraising star. That would be amazing. So I guess it depends. What you're asking is if you were, say, asking for a large proportion of it and you got too much money, would you have to give it back? I guess potentially, or you could direct it with the trust's permission. I think that if you're over successful, then that's a really great place to be. So I'm not sure if that helps or not. Trust in charity plays into funding. Oh, can anyone give a link to Factory Phi? So it's Factory Phi spelled PHI, and it's Factory FACTARY. So hopefully it's easy reads. That helps. I can send. Someone's already posted that. Thank you. Da, 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 da. So I think that's it with the questions. I really hope that this has been useful. Please don't hesitate to get in touch with me on Facebook and LinkedIn. I've got a website if you want some help, or just, as a sounding board. The Trust Fundraising Hub is such a great place. There's such a great community for trust fundraisers, very active, a lot like the fundraising chat as well. So I guess just keep talking, and if you want some support in identifying new prospects, reach out to a freelancer. Doesn't have to be me, obviously, because I think you can get a lot of support, and as I say, hopefully a really good return on investment. So I hope that's enough for everybody today. Thank you, especially if you're watching over your lunch break. I had a very early lunch to make sure my tummy wasn't rumbling during this. But that's it. So I hope you all have a great rest of your Monday, and maybe speak to some of you guys soon. Thank you. Bye.